In this update, we've got a dangerous flash flooding setup as well as intense storms really start to build after the 4th of July holiday, as well as the intense heat. Welcome back, everyone. Pal Ponder on Weather here with your Friday update. This is Happy Friday before a long holiday weekend. We got a lot to cover in this update, so if you do like detailed weather breakdowns, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and notification bell to get all my daily updates to keep you ahead of the storm. So let's get right to it. At the current radar this morning, we've got some action happening across the midsection of the country. We do have some instability along a boundary here that's bringing some showers and thunderstorms this morning to portions south of Sioux City, as well as into Lincoln, getting into Des Moines here, as well as Topeka. There's also another area of disturbed weather right here near Ottawa and Quebec. That's actually going to be diving southeastward and be setting up the stage for a severe threat along the northeast going into tomorrow. But we also have another area of disturbed weather, this low pressure center, mainly off the coast here of the southeast. But some of that instability is pushing inland towards Savannah and to Charleston. But yes, the main activity this morning is that disturbed area down into the Gulf of Mexico. That is finally drifting northward this morning and dumping copious amounts of rain, especially along the coastal areas in and around the Galveston area, the Port Arthur area, Beaumont, and getting into portions of Lake Charles now as this continues to slowly drift, pulling in all that Gulf moisture, dumping some really serious rain in that area. So let's kind of zoom in and take a look at the overall radar this morning. Down here in Jamaica Beach, Lake Jackson, into Freeport, down into Angleton, into Galveston area, they've already picked up several inches of rain. All these areas in red here, that is areas where you could be looking at training cell thunderstorms. We're talking, I've seen rainfall rates of up to 3, if not almost 4 inches per hour in some isolated spots here. And they've already got flash flood warnings in portions of Port Arthur just south of Beaumont as these continue to drift northeast, dumping some extremely heavy rain. Now it's going to be entering portions of Louisiana, so they're going to be on the bullseye from this high impact event, especially along the coast. Let's take a look at some of these preliminary rainfall totals so far. I mean, look at kind of the bullseye where they do have that flash flood warning in place in and around Port Arthur. Yeah, that's upwards to 9 inches of rainfall already with this system in some of these isolated spots. So some of these areas in these reds down here towards Lake Jackson, getting into Galveston, you've already seen 2 to 3 inches of rain. And some of these isolated pockets where you see these whites and purples here, that's upward to 6 inches, 6 to 8 inches. And all that rain is drifting into parts of Louisiana, and they're going to be under the gun over the next 24 to 48 hours. So let's take a look at the overall, the latest HRRR model, the next 48 hours, and it's putting about some serious copious rain amounts drifting, especially right along the coast, Lake Charles, getting into Cameron area. Those areas, especially along the areas to the south, again, we could be looking at 6 to 10 inches of rainfall. And some of these isolated spots, yeah, upwards to possibly 15 inches is maybe definitely not ruled out, especially like right along the coast. So this is a dangerous flash flooding setup, but it's all along those training thunderstorms. You get under those rain bands of those 3 to 4 inch rains per hour, that can spit out very serious flash flooding setup. So that's very dangerous down there towards in and around the Galveston area this today into tomorrow, especially along into Lake Charles, further south into southern Louisiana. Some of that rain will drift into portions of East Texas and going into further north into Louisiana, and then it will reach all the way portions of southern Arkansas with maybe 2 to 4 inches kind of widespread. But that area will slowly kind of wind itself down, as we transition into Sunday, but lighter amounts as you push further off into, Mississippi and going into Alabama. So the storm threat today along that boundary where they do have the storms this morning, that's going to shift a little bit further off into the south, taking advantage of some of that daytime heating. So you could be looking at a pocket of some damaging winds and some of these stronger storms that could break out into portions of Kansas City this afternoon, getting around, Columbus, Ohio, areas into Pittsburgh. some of these stronger thunderstorms could creep into portions of South Dakota here along this boundary. And as we get into tomorrow, really the main setup is along the northeast. It shows you that disturbed weather in Ottawa this morning. That's going to be drifting further off to the southeast today. Then by the time we get to that daytime heating into tomorrow, then we're looking at, a pocket of higher instability thunderstorms kind of breaking out. So setting up in portions of DC, into the Baltimore area, places like into Philly, into Scranton, even portions of Albany up there. This, as we go into all the way up into Boston, you could be under the bullseye of seeing some of those damaging winds and some of those larger hailstones. We're talking quarter size, even maybe possibly up to ping pong size type variety as we get deeper into the late afternoon, early evening time frame. So definitely be on the lookout for those stronger storms up there. And so we can break it down for you over the next 48 hours, kind of the lightning display where these storms could take place. Yeah, over portions of the Dakotas, getting into northern portions of Nebraska. There's another little boundary heading, through southern Kansas, through southern Missouri, southern Illinois, Indiana's pocket of storms, and then have that higher instability go through the DC area, portions of Virginia, especially along the East Coast there into Philly. Those could be on the bumpy side. Yeah, most of that instability off the southeast coast is well offshore. So we could be looking at some sporadic storms right along the coastal areas, but the main impact from this low pressure is really going to be out in the open waters. And of course, we have those sea breeze action all over Florida. And then, yes, where all the copious amounts of rain are happening right along the coastal areas and around Galveston, heading into Lake Charles, going into Cameron. Those areas are going to be under the gun to seeing those flash flooding setup over the next 24 hours. So as we transition into your Sunday time frame, there's that boundary. So I think the low pressure center down here off the coast kind of winds itself down. And then you're just looking at kind of like daytime heating thunderstorm activity that'll pop up in the daytime, then wind itself down as the sun sets. We could be looking at some little heavier activity into portions of Nebraska, getting into Iowa, as we go into your Sunday time frame. But the monsoonal threat will continue, and then the ridge of high pressure will be coming back over a good chunk of Texas, unfortunately, with some of those triple digit heat temperatures coming back starting into your holiday time frame going into Monday. So we can actually see some of those temperatures now as we transfer into your Monday, July 4th holiday. A lot of people probably have a lot of plans, outdoor cooking, spend a lot of time with the family. I know I've got to get together myself. So yeah, I mean, if you live in the Texas area, you got that heat ridge coming back. Texas, Oklahoma, we got widespread upper 90s, if not pushing the century mark again. That'll spread northward into Kansas City, eventually heading off into portions even further north into Nebraska as the heat really will start to build. But it's pretty nice still out here into the Pacific Northwest. They had those several day warm up, but then now it's pulsed back down. So we're talking, low 70s, middle 70s. That's nice weather up there, guys. So not everywhere is experiencing all the heat. There's definitely areas across the northern periphery that are experiencing some really comfortable temperatures coming up on your July 4th holiday. But yeah, the main story this week is going to be these intense storms are going to be building, but also the intense ridge that's also going to be building further off to the south. So by Tuesday, we've got a 594 DM. That's a pretty significant ridge of high pressure going to be digging back in. And just to the northern periphery, that's where we're going to be seeing a pretty significant storm threat really starting to break out, I think. So we have a trough that's going to be building off across into the northwest. We showed you some of those cooler temperatures, and I think that really amplifies as we have another trough. And we could be looking at these mesoscale convective systems kind of blow up and then traveling to the northern periphery down on the northern periphery of these ridges, amplified by this heat dome that's really going to be taking shape over the midsection of the country, and especially as we get deeper into the week. So if you take a look at that trough going into Tuesday, we've got a pretty significant cool spell coming in for the Pacific Northwest with all that heat going to be building in the central part of the U.S. The ridge of high pressure is really going to be dominating. That's going to be lifting further north. And it's this northern periphery, these boundaries, where I think these mesoscale convective systems are really going to be blowing up in the heat of the afternoon they could be traveling down southeast and really start to take shape and follow the instability. So we could look at by Tuesday some of this Cape value, some of this, your convective available potential energy. It's got a lot to work with. So if we get these little mesoscale convective systems to really blow up in the heat of the afternoon, it will follow these higher instability totals in and around the Dakotas, getting into southern portions of Minnesota, getting into Iowa. That'll traverse down southeastward into Illinois, into Indiana. We could be looking at several rounds of these. These are potentially high wind producers. We're talking possibly 70, 80 miles per hour is definitely not out of the question. Some of these areas could be looking at bow segments as these storms really start to break out. So we're looking at a pretty, several days, potentially several days, as underneath you got all that sinking air in much of Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, as the ridge will start to really build and amplify over time. If we go into that Tuesday over the simulated satellite, you can see we've got potential a mesoscale convective system really starting to blow up over the Dakotas. And I think this will be continuing to dive southeastward. So this boundary here is going to be on the bullseye on the northern periphery of this ridge of high pressure that's going to be dominating much of the southern plains into the central plains for much of the week. So this area, I'm going to be high alert of seeing potential strong, severe thunderstorms. And this is how Derecho type setups do form. So I think, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, even into Friday, I think you're going to be under the gun to seeing a series of rounds and rounds of these mesoscale convective systems blow up on the northern periphery and then follow the northwest flow, and then could be some significant storms. But yeah, as we get into Thursday, look at the ridge that really starts to amplify. I mean, you saw Tuesday, hardly anything of a 594 DM. Right now, we're talking a huge expansion. So the ridge will just really start to intense, really start to amplify. We're going into July, right? We're going to be in the heart of summer. I mean, it's pretty concerning to see some of this, dominating ridge of high pressure, especially as this has a huge expansion. Then what is this down here further off into the Pacific? That's Bonnie, folks. That's actually Bonnie. I said, what are you talking about? Well, Bonnie's actually formed a storm. It actually was classified. It is now an official tropical storm Bonnie out here into the Western Caribbean. That is supposed to continue to push off to the west. We've got, flood warnings, tropical storm watches and warnings and for portions of Costa Rica and Nicaragua. That's where they're going to be sending copious amounts of rainfall in those areas. I think it's going to be traveling so fast. Right now, it's at 18 miles an hour. So it's going to keep the name Bonnie as it traverses and crosses over on the Pacific side. Then it's got all these open waters to contend with. We got pretty warm waters to deal with, and it is now expected to become a hurricane sometime on Tuesday, and really maybe potentially become an 85-mile-per-hour hurricane by the time we get into Wednesday. So Thursday rolls around. Yeah, it's right there out in the open waters of the Pacific, still, amplified as a storm. So here's the overall surface map by Thursday. I mean, we just have there's Bonnie down here out in the open waters of the Pacific. We've got that dominating ridge of high pressure, and the ring of fire pattern really starts to take shape as we looking at series of storms potentially blowing up over the Dakotas, through Minnesota, through Iowa, going through Illinois, going through Indiana, traveling across the southeast through Ohio potentially. So we'll have to definitely watch this as the week progresses. But I'm looking at some pretty significant storms really starting to break out, especially after the holiday weekend. You're starting potentially Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, even possibly into Friday. There's another system. There's the simulated satellite picture by Friday. We could be looking at, yes, another mesoscale convective system blowing up. It starts to amplify, showing some of these bow segments that could potentially start to break out. This could really start to elongate following the northern periphery of that ridge of high pressure. So we'll definitely have to watch this whole area throughout the week. And if you live up there, definitely be on high alert, as these systems have the potential to be really high wind producers, and even could form, but they do form those bow segments. This is how the beginning stages of these Derecho types of events And we are in derecho season right now. So we've got to be looking at this. And this is what the setup typically looks like when you have these derecho type setups for this time of year. So, but yeah, further south, it's all about the heat, guys. I'm sorry. I mean, we've got some intense heat with that 594, even possibly 597 ridge really building and expanding throughout the week. If that does come to fruition, by the time we get into the end of the week, I mean, we're looking at some of the hottest temperatures so far of the season. 105s, 106s in Dallas, 109s and Oklahoma, 107s, as those triple digit heats temperatures will really start to expand. I mean, even Denver could be approaching the century mark by the time we get into your going into the portions on Friday. But yeah, next weekend, it just gets crazy hot. That ridge of high pressure just really starts to expand and even dominate even more and get really starting to intense. Now the ridge really amplifies and lifts further north. It really starts to expand over the region. And we could be looking at even some serious heat. Even some models are printing out a 600. Let me look at the graph. Look at the graph in the top right-hand corner of the screen. It only goes to 600. So you're at basically the top of the range here. And that, if that comes to fruition, that is some serious intense heat that would be building over multiple states over the plains here. We're talking easily 105s, 110s. This is how you get 115 temperatures, guys. So this is some dangerous stuff that, if this does come to fruition, would be printing out some 110s, even some 115s across the plains as we go into next weekend. So we've got the big time storms going to be amplifying to the northern ridge, and that ridge will start to just really expand starting on Monday, but really slowly expanding all the way out throughout the week. So but here's your overall rainfall totals over the next 7 days. So you can see where the ridge is, right? So the ridge is pretty much dominated over much of Texas and Oklahoma. Just in the northern periphery, this is the boundary we're gonna be concerned about coming out of the Dakotas, especially getting its act together, portions of Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. So this is the boundary we're gonna be looking at for some really significant windstorms. There's the setup of flash flooding setup for the deep south today and tomorrow. But there's the setup with the low pressure system off the southeast coast. The higher totals are well out in the open waters. We got some pretty healthier totals, 1 to 3 inches right along the coastal areas. But overall, we've got pretty much dry conditions with those troughs coming in off the west coast, and that monsoonal flow will continue for portions of New Mexico and southern Colorado. So hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely leave your comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel to catch the latest update where I protect you before and after the storm.